from Blake, Education Programs Manager for Willistown Conservation Trust. And then you'll hear from the wonderful, talented Ken Leister in the blue shirt. Wave, Ken. So we'll he's an amazing guy who has built over 1,000 Bluebird boxes for bluebirds in our county. He's just, his dedication and passion just never run out. Very admirable guy. So we'll hear from him, and then we will open it up for questions from the audience and chatting about birds in your yard. So a lot of you are familiar, but for any new faces who may not be familiar with the Willistown Conservation Trust, we are a nonprofit land trust that's been conserving land in the Willistown area since the 70s. We protected over 7,200 acres to date. And then in addition to land preservation, we have some other exciting programs, including habitat stewardship, watershed protection, regenerative farming, and bird conservation. And all of these programs serve to model how we can all coexist: land, people, water, wildlife, and food production. We can all coexist harmoniously. So I encourage you to check out our website to learn more about all those programs. And then just a brief intro to Zoom. I think we're all pretty familiar with this by now. But if you move your cursor over the bottom, you'll get your options. You should have a chat option, a raise your hand option. If you have a lot of background noise, we request that you keep yourself muted. And you're welcome to enter questions in the chat box as we go, and we'll answer them along the way or at the end. And then at the end, we'll invite everybody to take your mute off, and so that we can chat freely. So with that, I'll share my screen here, get started. Okay. All right, so many of you might have participated in our homeowner bird box program. The Willistown Conservation Trust started this back in 2013, installing Bluebird boxes all over the Willistown area for homeowner bird box landlords, as we call them. So we've done about 250 boxes particularly for bluebirds since 2013. So making a big difference in our area for these cavity nesting birds. The eastern bluebird is a thrush. Many people are surprised to realize that these are related to other thrushes like the American robin, like the wood thrush that nests deep in forests. This is a picture of a wood thrush there at the bottom. And the eastern bluebird is cool because it is a cavity nesting thrush, unlike the other thrushes that are open nesters. And so that allows us to really see into their lives and kind of take on a role of landlord, as we call them, and take care of these birds and enjoy them growing and developing in your yard. So really neat experience. People have really been enjoying, especially this year in the age of COVID-19, connecting to birds in their yard in this way. So eastern bluebird, because it's a cavity nesting bird, unfortunately, it is susceptible to things like habitat loss, as all birds are, pesticides in your yard, and invasive species. So actually the eastern bluebird, and Ken will tell you later, that when he was growing up in York County in the mid-1900s, you didn't see bluebirds, even in farm country where you would expect to see them. They weren't doing so well in the mid-1900s. their decline started in early 1900s with the introduction of species, really aggressive invasive species, like the house sparrow here on the left and the European starling. These birds are both cavity nesting birds, so they will aggressively compete with bluebirds for cavities. So, you know, as farmland was being developed and there was less cavities for bluebirds to nest in, and then you add the competition from these invasive birds, it really took a toll on the bluebird population. And then with DDT and pesticides being used, it was looking pretty bleak. But then in the 60s and 70s, people started caring and realizing what was going on. DDT was banned, and many bluebird campaigns, nest box campaigns started, and bluebird trails that people closely monitored. And the boxes had a hole small enough to exclude the larger European starlings. So then they only had to worry about excluding the house sparrows and throwing out their nests when they took over these nest boxes. So bluebird boxes are the sole reason why you can see them everywhere now, and why they are so common, and we can enjoy these beautiful birds in our yards today. But I always like to mention that these boxes are simulating snags for wildlife trees. A snag is a synonym for a dead tree, the scientific word. So these dead trees used to exist in our landscape in open fields that may have gone through fires or cleared forests. And now everyone wants to tidy up their landscape. So when you get rid of these dead trees in the forest, you're getting rid of habitat for a fifth of the animals that exist in our ecosystem. National Wildlife Federation estimates that 1,000 species nationwide use these snags. And birds in particular, there are 40 species, including the eastern bluebird, that are secondary nesters. This means that they cannot make their bills are not strong enough to make their own hole in a tree. So they would rely on the holes made by other birds like woodpeckers that would carve out holes in dead trees. So secondary cavity nesters. So when you get rid of snags in your landscape, you're excluding the woodpeckers that then create habitat for so many other birds and wildlife. So consider leaving snags if they're not too close to your house, or cutting them to a safe height. And then they're kind of cool, like statues in your yard. Really neat looking. You can chop off the crowns and make like a candelabra type appearance. Even if you leave stumps tall, it can really benefit. So I always like to mention that. So our bluebird boxes are all made by Ken Leister, and he'll explain all the wonderful bells and whistles later. But this is a picture of one of them at Rushton Woods Preserve. And our bluebird boxes are used by a few other birds besides just bluebirds, and they're all great native species. And I'll just run through them. One is the tree swallow. This guy can be pretty competitive to the bluebirds. It's an aerial insectivore, so it hunts differently. The bluebirds dive down into the grass and pick up an insect, whereas the tree swallows catch insects on the wing. So they have two different hunting methods. So if you go to some of our preserves, you'll see that we have done what's called box pairing. So if you put two boxes relatively close to each other, like within 6 feet, a bluebird will nest in one, theoretically, and a tree swallow will nest in another. If you put the boxes too far apart, you may get tree swallows in both of them because they are very, very competitive. But they're more competitive with their own species. So by putting the boxes closer together, like pretend it's a townhouse development or something, and they're close together, they will exclude a tree swallow from moving in next door and open it up to bluebirds that hunt differently. So the tree swallows don't consider them as big of a competitor as another tree swallow family that is also catching insects on the wing. Here's a tree swallow, and you look inside the box and you see a nest lined with feathers, goose or chicken feathers or any other feathers they find. This is a tree swallow. And then if you open a box and you see a nest lined with animal hair, animal fur, and moss, and these sweet tiny little brown speckled eggs, you have a Carolina chickadee. Then we have the house wren that also loves these boxes. This is a cute picture of a little house wren fledgling. So house wren, you'll open the box and it'll just look like a mess of twigs, just filled to the brim of twigs, and you think, how could there even be a nest in there? But if you sometimes you are able to peek in the back, and that's where the female will build actually a little nest behind all those messy looking sticks. And then we have the lovely eastern bluebird, everyone's favorite. And they have beautiful light blue eggs or white, and their nest is very neat. It's going to be all grass or pine needles, just a very prim and proper little nest. So songbirds are what we call altricial. So this means they're born naked and blind and totally helpless, basically larval. This little guy is a little couple-day-old tree swallow chick here, and they just look almost reptilian. It's very poorly advanced. And songbirds have these altricial young because songbirds are small, so they can only lay small eggs that are pretty poorly provisioned in terms of the yolk. So that's why their young, when they hatch, are not very developed. Now the trade-off is that this is the most vulnerable time of their whole life in the nest. All predators, snakes, mice, raccoons, flying squirrels, open cup nesters are susceptible to crows and grackles and jays. They'll take chicks and nestlings. So everything that eats live meat wants a baby bird. So you need to get out of the nest as fast as possible. So baby songbirds develop extremely fast. It's only about 2 weeks from hatching to fledging for these altricial young. Now there's different shades of altricialness. So the Carolina wren is they're born a little less altricial than the bluebird. The Carolina wren, from hatching to fledging, when it leaves the nest, only takes 11 days, whereas for the bluebird, it's about 18 days to fledging. And this is because the Carolina wren is an open cup nester, and therefore it is more susceptible to predators. This was one at Rushton Farm a few years ago. Carolina wrens build almost like cave-like nests. They'll build it anywhere. This is the weed whacker at Rushton Farm. And or they'll go in your planters, hanging baskets, all over. But because they're open cup nesters, their young need to hurry up and get out faster than the bluebirds, which can take their time a little more because they're safe in nest boxes or holes in trees made by woodpeckers. And then for contrast, the precocial birds are like the game birds, the ducks, the ruffed grouse. These are birds that are born fully. They can walk, they can pick up their own food, they can see, some of them can fly within like a day. And these are the larger birds that lay larger eggs with larger yolk, and therefore more well provisioned for the young to hatch a little further along developmentally. So a little bit about bluebird family life. They may start pairing up in March and do their honeymoon period where they're picking out their territories. The female lays 1 egg a day, and she incubates them all for about 2 weeks. And they hatch, and then as we said, it takes 18 days from hatch to fledge, around that time. And then after they fledge, day 18 to 25, so about a week after they fledge, they really are not capable of sustained flight. So they're hiding in dense cover and they're still being fed by the adults. Now day 28 to 34, the young are starting to learn to pick up food from the grass on their own. but they're still being supplemented. Their feedings are being supplemented still by the bluebird parents. And so it's really not until day 40 that the parents consider the young independent. So it's like a month after the chicks fledge when they really are on their own. So it takes a while. As I said, the bluebird lays 1 egg a day, and then she starts incubating all of the eggs. And they hatch relatively synchronously, and they've recently found that the later laid embryos can actually hear the peeping of the more advanced embryos that have hatched, and it speeds up the developmental process so that they all hatch more synchronously. So that's pretty amazing. They've done studies on other songbirds and found that the embryos in the eggs are actually, they can hear dad's song, and they're actually starting to learn their species specific song in the egg too. So really incredible. This is just a series of pictures to show just the incredible 2-week growth of these cavity nesting birds. And then the last picture here is of a young fledgling still begging from its mom at somebody's bird feeder. Mom or dad. So you want to monitor your bird boxes. You want to approach quietly from the side and knock so you don't scare the female if she's in there. You don't want to check first thing in the morning or last thing in the evening before it gets dark. You don't want to scare the mother off of the eggs if she's still incubating them at night. The mother stays in the nest until about day 8, until the thermoregulation of the young starts kicking in, and then she leaves them in there alone at night. And so around day 13, you want to stop peeking in that bird box because that's when they could pop out, the young. So around 2 weeks, you should stop doing your nest checks, just in case. But you can monitor your box, every other day. Some people do it every day. You don't want to do it more than once a day. But there's a lot of reasons for this. One, just for the joy of it. You learn so much and see this incredible growth. You want to monitor them to identify which species you have. If you have a non-native house sparrow nesting in your box, you will need to evict the house sparrow because, as we said, they're introduced species that will compete aggressively with bluebirds, even killing adults. So they're not too nice. You want to just keep pulling their nest out if you have a house sparrow, and eventually they'll hopefully give up. I was able to get rid of a house sparrow this way, just kept throwing out the nest, and they eventually gave up. It is legal to do that because the house sparrows are not protected under our Migratory Bird Species Act. Other problems that you may encounter if you're nest checking, you might have an insect problem like mites or blowfly. I've actually taken out an insect-infested nest and carefully repositioned the young in a new nest that I made with grass. And you can do this. Some bird box landlords have had success with this. You just simply make a new nest. It may not be what the mother had, but it'll be insect free and keep the chicks off of the hard wood. Predation prevention, you want to monitor your boxes because, if you have day-old chicks there the next day and the next day you check and they're gone, something got them. So you may need to install some sort of predator prevention, which I'll show later. Weather events. If you have a cold snap in the spring, I've never done this, but Julie Zickafoos writes in, this is a cool book, if you can see it, Baby Birds. An artist looks into the nest. Julie Zickafoos. She's a wildlife rehabilitator who's also an artist. But she talks about going to her nest boxes on the trail in a cold snap in the spring and taking the babies and putting them under her coat to warm them up, bringing them back from death's door, warming them up, getting them out of torpor so that they can then eat, and she feeds them a bug omelet, so scrambled eggs mixed with dried flies. And it can save the babies from a cold snap that would otherwise kill them. And then another reason to check the nest is preparing for a new brood. A bluebird may do 3 broods in a season. And if you can, snatch the old nest out and throw it out before they build a new one, just because it gets, it'll get crowded in there if they're building a new nest on top of the old, and then the nest is all the way up at the top, stacked up. And also the old nests just get kind of gunky and with fecal matter, and this picture showing. So the newly emerging feather quills of the baby birds are protected by a keratin feather sheath. And as the feathers grow, these sheaths kind of burst, and you see all those little white flakes are just the dried up feather sheaths. So I take the old nest out, and it doesn't have to be perfect. You don't have to like disinfect the nest for the most part. But I just take some grass and kind of just, or like a stick, and literally just like sweep out the bottom, sweep out some of those flakes and empty the nest. And that's it. I talked about old nests. So the one on the right you can see is a bluebird nest from a bluebird box, and it's all kind of pooped up. And then it's interesting to see the relative on the left is a wood thrush open cup nest. So that's one benefit of having an open cup. The baby birds can poop out the edge and not get the nest all pooped up. Predator protection, I'm sure Ken will go over more of this later, but the 2 main ways to protect your box are the knoll guard on the right, which is kind of a chicken wire entrance gate, and the baffles, like stovepipe baffle you see on the left. But this is actually a picture I found on the internet, and you see a black rat snake climbing up it anyway. So nothing is 100%. And then I just wanted to mention, you may have other open cup nesters in your yard. And another sort of predator you could consider is the brown-headed cowbird. People have been seeing these guys a lot. It's our most common brood parasite. This is a bird that used to be only restricted to the grasslands of middle North America, but has really increased its range all over North America as humans spread and cleared forests. So now these are very common in our area. This is the male that you see here. The female is brown, and they have an interesting life strategy. She has given up on the whole hassle of nesting and laying eggs and feeding the young, and she's decided to expend all of her energy on just laying eggs in other mothers' nests. So she has a lot more energy, so she can lay like 3 dozen eggs each season, depositing them in other mothers' nests that she's spying on. So the cowbirds are like spies, trying to find open cup nests. So you can see in this picture, this is actually a chipping sparrow nest. And these 2 little bluish eggs are the chipping sparrows, and then the big brown speckled one is cowbird. This is a beautiful nest of a red-eyed vireo that someone sent us, and you can see which 2 eggs don't belong. Those are the cowbird eggs. And they develop faster and they get bigger faster than the correct young, and so the correct young don't usually make it. They get outcompeted by the big, bold cowbird chicks. And last but not least here, before we get into Ken, whoopsies, just a few things you can do in your yard. I may have mentioned some of them already. Of course, minimize pesticide use, because these bluebirds are diving down right into your grass and getting insects. And Ken may talk later about what he's seen on golf courses that use a lot of pesticides. Mowing less. This is someone in our area who's decided to let a little bit of their yard go. Just a beautiful natural look. There's more insects there. It's more biodiversity, better for birds. Plant native trees and shrubs. The bluebirds are mostly feeding their young caterpillars and insects that they're finding on native plants. So the more native plants you have, the more caterpillars you'll have, and the more bird food, baby bird food you'll have. And then also considering some native shrubs that produce good berries in the fall and winter, because bluebirds kind of switch their diet a little bit once insects aren't so available in the fall and winter. And they'll feed on winterberry and holly berries in the winter. So consider those in your yard. Keeping cats indoors is a big one. And in fact, we will not install a bird box for people who have outdoor cats. American Bird Conservancy has discovered that feral and domestic cats combined kill 2 to 3 billion birds in the US each year. So that's not good. And then we mentioned about leaving snags. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce Ken Leister, who I lovingly call the Bluebird Keeper. He has built, I think I mentioned, over 1,000 bluebird boxes in the past decade, and donated the money, $14,000, to the Bluebird Society of Pennsylvania. His love and passion for bluebirds started maybe 25 years ago when he saw them in his yard and wanted to learn more about them, and so got involved with the Bluebird Society of Pennsylvania and became a county state coordinator, coordinating with 67 other counties. So just incredible passion, as I mentioned before. So Ken, would you like to take it away and talk about the bells and whistles of the best bluebird box ever?
Okay, thank you. You covered a tremendous amount of information, which is good. That was very good. And if you can keep the 2 pictures of the box up there,
yep.
I'd like to explain a couple things about that.
Yes, please.
If you look at the picture on the right-hand side, you see the front of the box. When I say the front, that's the vertical on the right-hand side. On that front, you will see saw kerf, and that's to help the chicks to come up into the entrance hall during about the last week of feeding. It helps them to move up and down. This box, by the way, if you are familiar with NABS, NABS, which is the North American Bluebird Society, they put out recommendations that you should have or do. I call them specs of a box. They have a whole list of specs. If you take that list of specs and go to this box covers every one of those specs. And there are 2 of them that are extremely important. The big roof is especially during this kind of weather. I understand that Longwood Gardens did a research project, and they tried all different ways to try and keep a box cool in the summertime. And they found out, now this is information from another person, but I think that person is pretty knowledgeable about what they do. He said that the one thing that helped to keep the box cool in the summertime, especially in this kind of weather, was the big roof. It keeps the sun from hitting the box, and it shades everything. Another setup for that is it also helps, and I say help, to prevent raccoons from getting into the box with the long overhang in the front. Because what a raccoon will do is climb that pole and sit up on top and then reach in. So if you're looking to buy a box, look to make sure that there's a big roof on this one. The other spec, and by the way, this is my spec. This is the only box that I know of that has this. If you notice the door in the right-hand side, the door is open. The major part of that door is a ½ inch smaller than the opening. Now, why would I do this? Why would I put a ½ inch gap on both sides of that door? Well, if you're into this and you check your boxes at least once a week, if it so happens that that box gets wet and you don't have space between the door and the box opening, the door is going to jam and you will not get that box open. Now, I monitor 52 boxes a week. I can't go back and double check and double check and double check. When I go to monitor these boxes, I have to be able to move pretty fast, open up the box, write down what's going on. So if I have a problem to getting that door open, then I would have to come back and redo my trail, and that would be a problem. Now, if you look at the left-hand side, the gap is covered. I call this a weather strip. Those ½ inch gaps on both sides is covered by what I call a weather strip. So if the box gets soaking wet on the outside, you can still open it. And as far as I know, this is the only box in the country that has this. Now, if somebody has it, I'm ready to answer questions about the box or about anything. We'll let you chat. You can ask the questions. And by the way, if somebody else in the audience has an answer, great, chime in, because one person doesn't have all the answers on something like this, because nature is tough and nature changes as it goes. So if somebody has a question, please. Yeah, I have to, there was a little blurb on the screen, Blake. I didn't catch it though.
Yeah, maybe somebody might have entered the waiting room. So if anybody has questions for us here, you can unmute yourself and ask away.
Blake, we do have a question in the chat. It's from
Oh yes, I won't forget about the chat.
Yeah, so he said, I read somewhere that boxes should be set up facing east so they can get morning sun. Is this accurate?
No, I didn't catch all of that. I'm sorry. Lindsay?
Someone asked about the direction of the boxes. Should they face east to get morning sun?
Okay, I get this question quite often. What you normally read is for the entrance hole to face away from prevailing winds. Yeah, that's a good point. But if you have a box with an overhang of a roof to 3.5 to 4 inches, you can face that entrance hole in any direction that you want, because the overhang will protect the entrance hole from prevailing winds and rain. So if you have a box, if you buy a commercial box where the roof is about a ½ inch to 1 inch overhang, then you have to turn it southwest or southeast. It's basically depending on what direction you're prevailing storms come. But with a box like this, with the overhang, you can turn that box any way you wish. And by the way, when you're looking to locate a box, the Bluebird Society of Pennsylvania has come up with a recommendation. Stand in a location that you want to put a box, and then look around and see if you can locate some type of a bush or a tree or something about 35 to 50 feet away from the entrance hole of that box. Now, why do we recommend that? When the chicks fledge, they have to have something to get into. You don't want the chicks on the ground. So if you have something like a bush or a tree or something about 25, 30, or 50 feet from the entrance, the chicks can fly to that. And the parents will put them up as high into that tree as possible. So that's another important factor as to what direction you're going to put that box. Okay?
Yeah, that's exactly what I was gonna say, Ken. I usually, when I put up boxes in people's yard, because they are your boxes with that nice big overhang, I don't worry about the compass direction. I really just kind of get in the zen of the bird, and what would I, if I'm a baby bird leaving the nest, where would I want to be facing? So, if there's a stream or something right there, face them away so they don't land in the water. Just think about the safety of these fledgling birds, because remember we said they can't really fly when they leave the nest very well.
Well, that's what happens, Blake. If they're out in the wide open and there's nothing for the chicks to get into,
Right.
Then they're on the ground. And then you have predators. You have cats. You have fox. You have coyote. You have crows. It's a wonder that any of these chicks make it from all the different things that they have to be aware of.
It's amazing.
I have my backyard, and I'm looking at my backyard right now. Right next to that famous shop is a Bluebird box, but it was inhabited by tree swallows. They fled 6 out of that one. In the middle of the backyard, and the middle of the backyard is the Bluebird box that got me started 30 years ago with the Bluebird Society. I've been working with birds ever since like 10 years old. That's a long time. I'm not going to tell you how long, but I was 10 years old when my grandfather put me in charge of something here. But that box in the middle of the backyard just fledged 5 bluebirds. I have another box out front that fledged 6 tree swallows. Another box out front that fledged 4 bluebirds. A box across the street that fledged 4 bluebirds. And the second nesting in there, they have 5 bluebird eggs. Down the street, they fledged 5 bluebirds. The nest was rebuilt, and she came back, and she has 5 eggs right now. So in the community here, in the last, or ever since March, there have been 18 bluebirds hatched and fledged in this area. Early this morning, one of the females brought 3 of her chicks to my suet cage. And she was feeding from the suet cage. By the way, I also have a red-bellied woodpecker that's bringing a young one to the suet cage, and that's another interesting setup. So, okay, anybody else with a question?
It's great that you mentioned that, Ken, because I think that a misconception, a lot of people think that you should only feed suet in the winter when they need that extra calories. But you're right. It's great to feed in the summer because all the birds are bringing their chicks to the feeder, and the chicks like that high calorie, easy to
Right.
digest food.
Yeah, I feed year round. I also feed live mealworms, but I get stingy with the live mealworms. I have two feeders, one out front and one in the back, and I don't put any more than 10 live mealworms in those feeders in any one day. And because I just don't want the chicks or the adults to become addicted to the mealworms. I'm a little stingy with it, but I think it's better in the long run. In fact, the ornithology people say we don't even have to do that, but we like to do it. So if you're feeding mealworms, either dry or live, make sure you don't put a whole lot of mealworms in a feeder, because they're like, these bluebirds are like kids in a candy shop. They'll eat and eat and eat and eat, and then it's detrimental to them. They get the gout on their feet. The pads on their feet will swell up because of the certain materials that they get. They get too much of it from the mealworms.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's excellent that you mentioned that, Ken. I just recently had someone email me about if they should be feeding mealworms because they have a bluebird pair nesting in their yard. And I always say, just like you said, you should be stingy with the mealworms because you don't want the parent eating too many mealworms to the young instead of the juicy, more nutritional things like caterpillars. And you will see if young have grown up mostly on just mealworms, their plumage will suffer from it. And a young bluebird that fledges will be duller, less bright blue, because the caterpillars are the insects that are feeding on the plants, and so therefore they have the carotenoids integrated. And when the kids eat the carotenoids of the caterpillars, it's really really good for their plumage development.
Yep, that's all. You know, we can help the birds, but sometimes we help them too much.
Yeah.
So be stingy, and you can raise your own mealworms. By the way, I started raising my own mealworms about 10 years ago, and
My wife loves that.
it's easy, real easy, and it's inexpensive too. Anybody
But how
else?
does your wife?
Well, she's not here right now, but she stays away from the mealworms.
Anybody have any other questions?
What kind of wood do you use to make the boxes, Ken?
Basically, anything I can get my hands on. But if you notice, I don't know if you can see it or not, but some places you will see tongue and groove. You will also see, okay, on the box on the left, the roof at the near the top, that's a tongue and groove. I try and stay with cedar or white pine. Cedar's absolutely, cypress is number one, but cedar is, and cypress is a little tough to get a hold of, but cedar, I used to jump and raid dumpsters, but I'm getting too old to get out of the dumpster, and I'm afraid if I stick it in it, I might go with the dumpster, so I stay out of that. I have 3 fence companies that just love to give me extra cedar. They have what they call cutoff, and I can use the cutoff as 8 inches long. And if it's not long enough, then I run a tongue and groove and glue them together. Or I run what is called a spline. I do a groove in both boards, cut another piece and put a spawn in between and glue everything together. But cedar seems to be the better one. And I got cedar, white pine. I do get some western hemlock every now and then. Douglas fir is a good one. So I get what I use what I get my hands on.
Mm-hmm.
Does that
Okay.
answer your question? I'm sorry.
Yes, thank you very much. Mm-hmm.
You're welcome.
And Ken, I'll just add to that. I remember you told me that a lot of the commercial boxes that you buy are made of plastic, which doesn't breathe like the wood does. So you always told me that the wood boxes are always going to be the best because of that breathing aspect.
Yes, and the other factor is a lot of the plastic boxes, they don't have enough ventilation, so that when you get like 5 or 6 chicks in there and they start to breathe, they emit moisture. The moisture cannot dry out, and what happens a lot of times is the inside walls they get mold on them, and that's not good for the chicks. A good example, real quick. I had a friend of mine who somebody gave her a plastic box. She put it up out front, and she told me that she put it up. About a week and a half, 2 weeks later, she emailed me and she said, you know, all the birds, and especially the bluebirds, they sit on top of it, they go in it, they come out of it, but nobody has nested. She then told me it was plastic. I said, come on, you take the plastic box down, I'll give you a box and I'll make a bet with you. Within 1 week, you'll have a bird in that box building a nest. She said, no, but she said, I'll take you up on the bet. I gave her a box. She took the other plastic box down. She put the wooden box up, and 3 days later, she emailed me and said, I owe you. She said, I have a bluebird nest started in that box. Go with wood. I don't care what kind of wood, but just go with wood. The plastic is just, it doesn't work. And thanks, Blake, for bringing that up, because that's also very important.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, the other thing that I wanted to mention, double check, especially this time of year, if you have chicks in a box and so forth, double check the vents in the floor. What happens is that the spiders get up in there, they do a web and it gets dust in there and the vents clog. And this time of year, when it gets 80, 85, 90, 92, 95 outside, especially if the box is in the sun, it does not have enough air circulation with those vents clogged. So take something and just go from the outside up under and open up the vents. If you have certain commercial boxes, they don't even have vents. And if that's the case, then when you can, take it down and drill some holes in the bottom. You need vents so that air circulation can go from up through the floor out at the top. Okay?
Yeah. Air, super important. So we have a couple questions in the chat. One question, if you have boxes up, but they haven't been used for 30 to 60 days, should you move it or wait until next season?
Move it. I would move it. There must be something wrong. Location, by the way, is very important.
Mm-hmm.
If you have it up and you don't have anybody, any bird using that box, and you have birds in your yard, more than likely you have it too close to bushes.
Mm-hmm.
And if you do, well, the other factor could be also that if you have it too close to bushes, you're going to get the house wren. Now the house wren is good, but by the same token, you're putting these boxes up so that you can help the bluebird. Okay.
And then here's a question that just came in from Emily Blackburn, who we know has had a really successful season with her bluebird. She's been sending me all kinds of awesome pictures. She says, how close together can you put 2 bluebird boxes?
No closer than 25 feet. If you get closer than 25 feet, then you start getting maybe one will have a bluebird in it, the other one will have a tree swallow in it. And if you get them too close together, you may the next year have 2 tree swallows. If you get them too close together, the tree swallows, what they do is they colonize. They drive everything else out. So no, I would not go any closer than 25. In fact, I don't go any closer than 50 feet. That way I may get a bluebird here and a bluebird over there. But my 50 feet, I also try and have some type of an obstacle in between and face the entrance holes away from each other. Because I have, in my backyard, I have a bluebird box in the back and a bluebird box right next to my garage out front. They're close, but the house is the obstacle in between.
Thank you.
And then what is the distance you recommend if you're trying to do the box pairing, having a tree swallow next to the bluebird? In your experience, what's the best distance for that? You want to have the 2 species next door.
You want to have a different species next door?
Yeah, the tree swallow and the bluebird in one.
Well, I'm going to look. I'm going to look at my backyard. I did this. I had a box in the middle of the backyard, as I mentioned before. A bluebird and a tree swallow were fighting over that box because I could see what was going on. So I built another box and put that box about 20 feet away from the first box. And the bluebird took the one box, tree swallow took the other box. Both boxes fledged chicks. So 20 feet, in around 20 feet. See, the bluebird male is extremely territorial. He'll drive anything and everything away. He'll even try and drive a sparrow away, but normally what happens is sparrows come in groups, and it's difficult. But the tree swallow and the bluebird, the males used to go at it. I mean, they would fight each other, and finally they decided that the bluebird gets in one box, the tree swallow gets the other box, and everything was fine. One fled 6, the other one fled 5.
Nice. See, I think I got all of the questions in the chat. Kate says, in addition to our bird boxes, my kids and I have fun observing the variety of nests around our home and barn. Should those nests be removed once the birds fledge like the bird boxes? So I think she's talking about the open cup nesters.
The cup nesters, but I'll just let the cup nesters go.
Yeah.
Yeah, just let them go. You also may be talking, if you're around a barn, you may be talking about barn swallows. I am not familiar with what you do with barn swallows other than just let them go until they're finished. You might clean them out after, when it starts to get cold. They're a whole different ball game. Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, the reason we clean out these nest boxes, and Blake, you covered most of this, those boxes with what I call chaff in them, you also get, you'll get ants coming up in there, and the ants love that chaff.
Mm-hmm.
You may get little mites inside the nest, and some of the nests get pretty messy. I took a nest out this morning. It was a tree swallow nest, and I'll tell you, I'm glad I wasn't in that nest because they get the inside of the box can really get nasty when you have tree swallows in there.
Yeah, I find that the bluebirds are better housekeepers than the tree swallows.
Yes. Yeah, maybe the people in the audience don't know what happens here. When a bluebird or a parent comes in the box to feed a chick, normally what they will do, the adult will feed the chick and wait anywhere up to like 8 seconds. And the chick will take its behind and turn it up and poop. But the poop comes out in a sack. It's called a fecal sac. So if you see when the chicks are being fed, if you see an adult come out of that box with a white thing in its bill, it's not an egg, it's a fecal sac. Yeah, I have trained my bluebirds to drop the fecal sac at my neighbors, not on me, at the neighbors north and south of me. And they do, and there's a reason for that. They don't just kick it out the door, because what would happen is predators would smell that, and the predators would know that there are young birds in the area. So they take those fecal sacs and they fly away and they drop them some other place.
Yeah, I always think that's so amazing how nature packages the poop in diapers. It literally looks like a diaper that they're carrying off.
That's right. That's basically what it is.
Yeah.
It's a diaper. Yeah, and the chicks will do that and up until they almost fledge. And that's why the inside of a tree swallow nest gets so terrible, because the tree swallows don't go in that nest like the last whole week. They'll feed through the entrance hole. And by the way, that's where the starling comes in. The starling sees the adult bird hang on to the outside and feed through the entrance hole. So the starling does that, and up comes a chick to get food. The starling reaches in with its bill and extracts the chick out and takes it. That's why you're going to try and keep starlings away from it if you can, which would be difficult. Wow, here's everybody.
Yeah, I should have done that for the whole question session so we could see everyone. We had another question. How long does it take you to make a box, Ken?
Well, I tell you, I really don't know, because what I will do is go into the shop and I'll take the material that I have and I'll start cutting a particular part and I'll stack it. Now, after I cut all the parts, I can put a box together in about 4 minutes. But then that's the parts are already cut. See, that's how I keep busy in the wintertime. I go to the shop and I take and start my machines, and I start cutting and cutting and cutting. And by the end of the wintertime, I have stack after stack after stack of parts, like you've seen the inside of that shop. You should see it now, though. There's all kinds of stuff stacked in there. Okay?
Yeah, and then Ken, why don't you tell us how we can get, how anybody here can get a Bluebird box from you?
Email me. If you're interested in getting a Bluebird box, the type that I build, email me and ask, information, and I'll get back for you. I'll get back to you. Blake, could you put my email address on there?
Yeah, kennepeg@aol.com, right?
Kennepeg, right, AOL.com.
Okay, I just sent it to everyone there. Now, Ken,
Yeah.
I think your inbox might have been full because I tried to email you and it came back at me that said your inbox was full recently. Just letting you know. So, but
And
then,
yeah, now there's one other thing here. If anybody belongs to an organization and you need a speaker, especially about bluebirds, let me know. I do that. And I'm another thing, Blake, I'm on a Zoom about bluebirds for Chester Springs Library. I've done 2 Zooms for Chester Springs.
awesome.
Okay.
Then someone's asking if you have the specs, and I'm just we send follow-up emails for these Zoom events, so all attendees will receive information like Ken's box specs and other good resources that I'll send out. So, and I
Okay.
will.
Yeah. Blake,
Yep.
there's another. If you want the print for the blue box or bluebird box, if you go to the Bluebird Society of Pennsylvania, get on their website. Up on the right-hand corner, it says More, M-O-R-E. Click on More and then go down the list and it says Ken Leister's Bluebird box. Click on that and it shows you the plans.
Yeah.
The plans for this box.
Yep, and we recently put that on our website too, so I'll send everybody those links afterwards.